The J. Michael Show.
Welcome to the show. We are talking with Darrell Larson. He is an accomplished actor, a poet, a writer, an author, and we're going to get into all of that. But let's say hi to Darrell. Hello, Darrell.
Hello. Thank you, Jay, for inviting me.
Well, welcome
really
to the
appreciate
show. Welcome to it. And, I like to go back to the beginning. So let's go back to, the 1970s when you first started in acting. And how did you get started in acting?
Well, I got here actually in 1968. I was a student at UCLA and in the film department. I was going to direct movies. And I started working almost immediately in television. I sort of thought, well, let's see what happens if I get an agent. I got an agent in about 12 minutes. I was very cute. So doors opened. And I also had been acting in high school, even though our high school had no theater department. We did 6 plays while I was there in my high school, just because I wanted to. And
the first show that you started out on was Marcus Welby, MD. Is that true?
That was the very first job I had in show business.
Wow.
And I ended up doing 2 more Welbys. Robert Young was such a sweet guy and loved me, really, and because I was a natural. And in fact, the first audition I had at all, but in L.A., was for a play that Sal Mineo was directing, and I saw a notice in the green room at UCLA. It said, Sal Mineo is directing a play? What? And so I found my way down there. I was 17. And the reading went really well. I didn't know how, in some ways, I was so off the turnip truck that I didn't really, all I was doing was trying to keep up with him and read the scene.
Right.
And after we were finished, he said, so what have you done? And I said, well, plays in high school. He said, come on. I said, no, that's really, here I am. And I didn't get the part. Don Johnson got the part because Don had done a lot of stuff by then and was a hit in a play in San Francisco, a musical version of As You Like It, the Shakespeare play. And so he was very experienced and was great, was incredibly cute too, and was really good. And Sal said, well, be the understudy.
Right.
Come to rehearsal. But I was a student at UCLA. I had to go to class and all that, but I did make it down there. And here's the sweetest part of it: the opening night. There's a big party. All these people there that Rock Hudson and Roddy McDowell and Sal. I saw him notice me from across the room, and he came over and he said, you should go back to the dorm. You're not ready for this scene, and it was a Hollywood scene,
right,
will eat you up.
Oh goodness.
And you will have no choice in the matter. And this also included sexuality, because I considered myself omnisexual. I'd seen Rebel Without a Cause. I want to make love with all of them, have sex with all of them. And James Dean, Natalie Wood. Are you kidding me? And Sal was pretty cute too. So he and I had talked about that I didn't want to necessarily make a choice. And he said, you won't have a choice. This will just, they'll devour you. Keeping in mind, I'm 17.
Right.
And he said, you should go back to the dorm and work a little bit there, and you're going to go far. Don't worry about it. And it could be one of the kindest things anyone ever did for me.
Wow.
And we stayed in touch. And I said, but I want to work with you. He said, we'll work together. Of course, 2 years later, he was murdered
Oh.
in the parking lot of his building. But that was the way I got going. Was he said, go meet my agent. And I did. And the agent said, yeah, we're repping you. And within a few months, I was working.
Wow.
So, but my first real showbiz job was on Marcus Welby. And again, Robert was so kind to me, and we got along so well that I did 2 more Welbys. And also, he did these 2 movies of the week called All My Darling Daughters and All My Darling Daughters Anniversary. And they were, 2 years in a row, and he had 4 daughters, and they all wanted to get married on the same day. I mean, it's the premise was somewhat unlikely, but again, I had so much fun, and Eve Arden was in it.
Wow.
So I look around at the great people that I was. Ann Southern, I got to work with, and Jack Albertson, and one of the next big things I did was a TV movie called Congratulations, It's a Boy, with Bill Bixby.
Wow.
Yeah. And Ann Southern was in that and playing his mom. And so I was, sort of embraced in a beautiful way by show business, and worked a lot through the 80s, and, did culminating in this film called Mike's Murder.
Right.
Which that
we're definitely
at the time
going to get to Mike's Murder. Just so the audience knows, let me throw out a few shows you've been on. You've been on Futureworld, Brainstorm, Matlock, L.A. Law. You, of course, did Mike's Murder. You've done L.A. Law, Special Victims Unit, Men at Work, Project UFO, which I loved that show, and The China Syndrome. So you've really crossed over into a lot of different movies. But your biggest movie, I guess, your starring role was Mike's Murder. So talk to us about Mike's Murder.
Yes. Well, it is. I would venture to guess, partly because of where I'm at in my age, it'll be the best thing I ever did. It was written for me, as were the other lead roles, Deborah Winger and Paul Winfield. And our parts were written for us. We all knew James Bridges. I knew him very well. And he wrote this for me with me in mind, and it was extremely controversial when it was released.
This was in the early 80s, right?
Yes. And I believe it's 83, but I lose track. Anyway, it was very revelatory about drugs, cocaine in LA. Right. It was a real expose is the wrong word, but it reflected what life was like in the 80s in LA. Certain elements of bisexuality, and it was a very upfront movie. People were not ready for it, especially not in show business. Made people really nervous.
And was it a theatrical release made for TV? How was it presented?
It was a movie. It came out. Jim had done Urban Cowboy and China Syndrome, and this was probably his most personal film. It reflected a true story and somebody he really did know who was murdered, and just slipped through the cracks. Nobody investigated. Nobody cared, and then it turned out that the killer was a kid who had been at UCLA, was a football player and a real star. And he just, again, LA devoured him. And Mark was the name of actual Mike, was a Midwestern kid that Paul Winfield actually had picked up on the road and brought to LA. And Mark started being he was embraced again by a certain community, and he became a tennis instructor and, let's admit it, coke dealer. And in the midst of all that, he got murdered. And Jim and others in the community, including Paul, felt really bad about it. They felt like they didn't save him, and they might have. And so all of that is in the movie.
Right.
And they did a screening in Auburn, California, near where I grew up, actually. And it was classic, legendary disaster.
Wow.
People were screaming about it. This guy should be hung, and just really upset.
Right.
And, and in LA, people, especially in the business, were afraid of it because it was too
controversial.
Yeah. So Warner Brothers pulled it after a month. It got very good reviews. Pauline Kael absolutely loved it. And yet,
the audience wasn't ready for it.
It just got lost. And now, though, the movie is now a cult movie.
Right. It's still available.
It's still available. People are really into it. I get people communicating with me, especially through Facebook, all the time about this movie and what it meant to them.
Right.
And then there was a James Bridges Festival here in LA at the Fine Arts, which is Quentin Tarantino's. He fixed the place up and does festivals of directors he loves, and they resurrect some stuff. But in this case, they showed all of Jim's movies: Urban Cowboy, China Syndrome, Baby Maker, 9:30:55. These are all really excellent movies. Jim had a great reputation, and nobody didn't love him. You get what I mean?
Right.
Everybody revered this guy, and yet they couldn't figure out why he made Mike's Murder. Why would he make a movie like this? But this festival they had, Mike's Murder was the tent pole in a way.
Right.
And I went down thinking, oh, this is going to be nice. People will see it. There was a line around the block to see this movie that had gotten lost.
Yeah, it was like gone.
Yes. And here it is, a legend to people, or maybe that's too strong a word, but definitely a cult movie.
Right.
And that was so gratifying to all of us because we really meant this movie. We really had investment in it on a personal level because we were trying to tell the truth.
Right.
And it's still alive.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about your character in Mike's Murder.
Oh, yes.
Who were you in the movie?
Okay. What I am is the bad boy that in my real life. I was the bad boy that gets Mike in trouble. We were given some cocaine to sell by these big dealers. And while we're there getting supplied, we steal a little bit. They're out of the room, and the dealers, and we look at each other and go, and I go, we put a bunch in a bag that we were selling on the side. And they found out about it. And they come after us.
Right.
And when I realized Mike has been murdered in the most horrendous way, I go on the run. So for most of the movie, I'm being chased by the dealers' guys. And I get more and more and more terrified. And keep in mind, I have a bag of Coke that I'm carrying around. And after that screening, there was a feeling like, well, let's cut this. Let's fix this if we can, because there was a lot of amazing work in it. And so Jim had told the story in a kind of European fashion. A kind of, there were 3 huge scenes that Deborah went from person to person to person, and I'm the last person. And the scene is it's about 15 minutes long, and at the end of it, I get dragged out of the place to be murdered. But when they reshot it, me and Jim sat down and said, okay, he said, well, where would you go? What would you do?
Yeah.
And we figured it out. I said, well, first I'd go to the West Beach Cafe and sell some of it. I had actually worked at the West Beach Cafe, and it was one of the places you could probably pretty easily score some coke. And so we planned it all out. And so it became a movie about me and Deborah getting closer and closer and closer and then colliding.
Wow.
And that scene is, I'll stand by it to my grave. It's an amazing scene. And I gave my all to it.
Right.
Mostly
How do you, when you're approaching a scene like that or approaching a movie like this, as you said, there's a lot of terror in it. How do you emotionally prepare yourself for this kind of role?
My life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Jim wrote it.
You draw from your own life.
Yeah, I wasn't like total maniac, or loose cannon, or whatever you want to call him, like Pete, who's my character. Mm-hmm. I wasn't if I had taken a left turn, is the way Jim put it, I would be Pete.
Right.
And I thank God I didn't make that left turn, partly because I met Jim and Jack, his mate, Jack Larson, and they kept me, they kept guard on me.
Right.
And introduced me to an incredible array of people. The line that we used to say was, Jim and Jack know everybody alive who's worth knowing.
Right.
And from Katharine Hepburn to Gertrude Stein it was incredible who they knew and who I got to meet through them.
How was your online chemistry with these other actors as you're acting with them?
Well, I knew Winger very well. In fact, I lived with her for a while. Mm-hmm. Not in a really, it wasn't like
romantic way, or?
Well, it was physical,
mm-hmm.
but it wasn't that kind of love. Mm-hmm. If you know what I mean. We were never thought about. We weren't going to be exclusive,
mm-hmm.
And we remained friends through it all. And so there was a way in which we were all, because it was Jim and because we loved Jim, we gave everything we had to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it took about 2 weeks to shoot that damn scene.
Wow.
And I would do a headstand between setups to keep that energy, I did a lot of yoga, and I could do a headstand right here if you wanted me to. Even now,
You don't have to do that.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
You're off the hook.
Yeah, I don't have to prove it. But that's what I would do. I would just keep myself in that zone.
Mm-hmm.
And the scene with the big scene, after which I get dragged out, and then next time you see me, I'm dumped in the ash pit or whatever, mm-hmm. with a plastic bag on my head. They've just dumped my body. It doesn't end well. Right. But I'll tell you, the thing about it was, again, I would do anything for Jim. And Winger and I knew each other well enough so that we could give ourselves over to it.
Right.
And the more we worked, the more intense it became, which is what it should do. It should accumulate energy. Concentration creates energy. Mm-hmm. Is really the secret in acting, particularly. Keep your mind on it.
Right. Are there any particular scenes, moments, or behind-the-scenes experiences on anything that you've done that deeply resonates with you or are particularly memorable? Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll tell you, I was just talking to somebody about, there's a movie called Twice in a Lifetime, mm-hmm. in which I played Gene Hackman's son.
Right.
And, the whole thing could have ended right there. He came up to me, he'd seen Mike's Murder. Mm-hmm. and we had a table reading. We rehearsed, which is unusual in a movie, but in this case, Bud Yorkin was directing, and he had Jane and he had Ellen Burstyn, who's perhaps one of the greatest.
Right.
She's my mom, and and most spectacularly, Anne Margaret.
Wow.
And Amy Madigan and Ali Sheedy, and it was a wonder. And Brian Dennehy was the bartender, and it was again, it was one of those movies where it was a family immediately. And Gene at the first rehearsal came up to me and said, I just want to thank you for doing this part. I know it's not really big, but I saw you in Mike's Murder, and I know you're capable of much more. And I'm just, I just was glowing with the notion that he would dig that he would respect me enough to come over and tell me that. And I said, if I could have picked a dad, it would be you.
Wow.
And he hugged me. And from then on, every scene we had, my friend just brought this up. I was talking to her, when you were calling me. She said she had just seen the movie again, and that the bond between the two of us was so palpable and so real, that in some ways it to her, it kind of saved. It was a great movie. I'm not getting you, don't get me wrong, but there was something about it that this connection between Gene and I that gave it some kind of depth. And then the other kind of highlight of it was at that first rehearsal, Anne Margaret came up to me and said, "Here, you got to sit by me." And in the reading, we're sitting at the table, and I'm a little taken aback.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I'd watched
Anne
her,
Margaret.
Anne Margaret, and still incredibly beautiful. And from then on, she insisted I sit next to her. So it was like 10 days of work on this movie, and we were all there at once, whether we had scenes or not. We were all there around a table.
You were talking about those experiences, and I want to ask you, at what point in your career did you sit back and say to yourself, I've made it. This is it. This is the big time?
Well, first of all, it's never over.
Right.
And it's never achieved. You know what I mean? I never felt that, really, but I did feel incredibly lucky, incredibly fortunate. Might not even be luck, because there's a lot of people with a lot of talent that don't get to that in those situations.
Right.
But Marcus Welby, Robert Young, Father Knows Best. I'm in the scene. And by the way, the other actors in that included Cloris Leachman and William Schallert.
Wow.
And,
great cast.
Great cast. And and this was the first job I had. And the first close-up I ever had in a show, in anything. Cloris was watching it, and she led the company in applauding me. Wow. She knew it was my first close-up. And she thought it warranted the whole company applauding.
Wow. Do you think that you have a particular acting style?
Not really. I grew up watching people and knowing that, Montgomery Clift, for instance, he stood out to me. So did James Dean. So did Marlon Brando. So did Steve McQueen.
Right.
I watched these people and thought, okay, that's what I'm trying to do. What are they doing? And to me, one thing that always stood out was that they were vulnerable in a certain way. They were naked. They were opening up their hearts and letting it be there. And I still do that. I did it on Sunday, reading a poem about my mother.
Mm-hmm.
People were in tears afterwards, which was definitely my goal.
Right.
But you don't get that if you don't plant your feet and get ready.
Right.
So I don't think I have a style. I think I have a desire.
What would you say is what you enjoy most about acting?
I think the opportunity to reveal yourself.
Mm-hmm.
The even the darkest part of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You can express that safely. Right. Through your character. In life, it's not quite so safe. And I think that the opportunity to try to tell the truth. I was just saying about Gene. It's impossible for Gene Hackman to lie. Mm-hmm. Absolutely impossible.
Wow.
There's nowhere to go where he can pretend. Right. And I've always tried not to pretend.
That's it. Yeah, be yourself. Be who you are, and then that's
as much as you can. And also, in a certain sense, let the character live. Mm-hmm. So you're giving the character compassion, and you're on his side regardless of what it is that he's doing. It might be horrible.
Wow.
So I played killers.
Yeah.
And really messed up people, like people.
Psychotic type people?
Yes, but I'm not judging them.
Right.
I'm on their side.
Uh-huh.
I want them to have a fair shake at it, no matter what.
Right.
And you can't look to, I know this is not going to work out. Like in Mike's Murder, I couldn't be playing the fact they're going to dump me in a trash bin. I can't do that.
Yeah.
Even a movie like Men at Work, which again I really admired Emilio Estevez just from knowing him around the show business community. Mm-hmm. I really respected him. I thought that Brat Pack group were all devoted to the right things, but Emilio especially. So he calls up and says, "I've got this part, but you get killed in the first third of the movie, and then they carry you around, right?" Yeah. And now I'm gonna. So I got laughs as a dead man. That ain't easy. And the guy in the first third gets more and more hysterical, and then he gets killed. But in the meantime, there was a lot of great comedy. I thought it was a really excellently written movie, and Emilio was so comfortable on a soundstage that because he'd grown up on them, he'd go down to work with his dad, Martin Sheen, and so there were times after I was dead, I still had to be around, and
tons of scenes where you're just there.
Yeah, except it would be my corpse would pop up. They'd stuff me in something, and then I'd be revealed, or an oil drum is the most. I'm in an oil drum, and then the drum falls out the back of the car, but I had to be seen in the oil drum. You try. I mean, getting all the way in to an oil drum is
trying to squeeze in there. Yeah.
You got to squeeze. You got to figure out, where do I put my leg? Okay, here, and like this. And good thing I had done yoga.
Right.
And and he said at one time, "Can you get in that cupboard?" And I look at it and said, "Well, take the shelf out, and I can get in there." And I did. I would do whatever Emilio needed.
Wow. And so it was a very physical role then for you. Very physical.
Oh, yeah, that's what it's about. To get laughs, there's one big laugh in it that I get where some cops are sort of, they don't trust these trash guys. Emilio and Charlie play garbage collectors. and they think something's up. And I'm there, dead, with this messed up cowboy hat on my head, and I have to freeze my face while they're yelling in it.
Right.
Right in my face, they're yelling at it.
Right.
Right? Trying to, what's the matter with him? He was at a party and he got kind of, well, wake up, and they're yelling at me. And I can't do anything. That's the job. And then the boys are holding me, and then they let go of me, and I fall right out of the frame. Boom. Right? Well, you try it. Your body wants to fold up as you fall.
Right.
So you don't hurt yourself. But you can't fold up. Even after you're out of frame, you can't fold up. So they put a little mattress thing and a mat,
right.
A pad, a furniture pad down on the ground that I could fall on. But that's still, your elbow wants to go like that as you're going. So that was such a challenge.
Yeah.
And it was so much fun to give him what he wanted.
Right. Fantastic. Another quick question for you. When you go to the theater, you're watching movies, what is your all-time favorite movie yourself?
That's impossible, dude. Come on. Well, I can tell you that as a kid, I think Rebel Without a Cause made the biggest impression on me.
Right. Okay.
And, but I mean, if you saw my room, I have all these pictures of movie stars around. I mean, this is the poet Rilke. I'm not getting into that, but I've got Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman and Audrey Hepburn. I've got pictures of all these people that impressed me and that are what I aspire to be in that narrative. Henry Fonda and Barbara Stanwyck and Richard Widmark. And later I got to meet Richard Widmark, for instance, and be his friend. And so I got to at a point where I met Meryl Streep and worked with her and became a friend of hers. And all those opportunities, Mike Nichols, I call a friend. And those, to feel like they do accept you as a peer, whether you're famous or successful or whatever. I don't really think I'm successful.
Do you think you're famous? Do you think you're famous?
I didn't used to. But now with Facebook and this exposure to, I mean, you wanting to talk to me, does that mean I'm famous?
Well, I think that you're famous, but we're friends on Facebook, so I just communicating with you like that is normal, and you're kind of a guy I know, but at the same time, you are a famous actor. Yeah,
I mean, I'm a mid-range. You know what I mean? I wouldn't say I was a star, although I starred in movies. I never was in a really big hit.
How do you feel about that? How does that make you feel? That do you feel like you've made it? You're there?
No, because that would mean sort of letting it go. And I do theater constantly and other kinds of events. As I say on Sunday, I've become more and more accepting myself as a poet. So I read a lot, and I'm poetry readings and stuff. And I'm never going to not work. You know what I'm saying? I'm 73. I'm not going to
not retire.
Retire. What the fuck does that mean? Oh, sorry. But I will say that, for instance, about 3 months ago, maybe 4, who knows? I've taught a lot, so I have a lot of students. I taught at Columbia for 12 years. I taught at New York Film Academy. I've taught a lot, so I have a lot of students that I've worked with who have never stopped trying to communicate with me, and we've become friends in some cases. But mostly, if they need if they need to work on an audition or something, they'll come to me. There's one particular kid who's Korean, and he and some friends started a company, a production company, and they're making movies, making shorts, and they decided they want to do a feature. And they modeled this feature on a French film called Eyes Without a Face. They write up a script. They called me up and said, "We wrote this for you, this part.
Wow.
Will you do it?" Now, again, I'm in my 70s. Somebody is, and all the best things I've done, including Mike's Murder, have been things that were intended for me.
Right.
Or shaped to, I've done a lot of good stuff that I admire, but the things that were really meant for me, like Mike's Murder, again, of course, it's easier to say, "Oh, I know I'm right for this." Now, this part that I just did is a guy who wants to be has wanted to direct films all his life, and has directed a lot of things, but never a feature film. Now he gets an opportunity to direct a feature film, and it gets out of his control. My friend, the Korean kid, is playing the lead in a movie within a movie. I'm directing that movie, and he comes into it, and he takes over. And so in each scene, I'm a little more hysterical. In fact, the other day, the director said, we were doing some research. He said, "I want to see some of that Mike's Murder drool." Because there is a moment in Mike's Murder where a big thing of drool comes out of my mouth. How do I do that?
Wow.
Obviously, I didn't really intend it, but it didn't stop me either. Right. In other words, I didn't go out of the scene because I dripped drool on Winger. You're going to have to deal with that. And of course, the scene is better because of that.
Right.
But in this case, at this point in my life, with all these people in their 30s who love movies and know how to make them, you can make movies with 10 guys now, 10 people. Yeah. You don't need all these hundreds of people moving stuff around. The video equipment makes it look like $1 million picture. And again, my thing is give over to this guy, let him break this guy's heart. He's losing his movie. So when he starts killing people, it's totally, of course I would. You're stealing this movie from me.
Right.
So that is, especially because they wanted me. They wanted me. I will give it my all.
You have directed a lot of plays yourself. You've worked with Ed Harris on many projects. Talk to me about all that.
So there was a point in Hollywood, in show business, where the theater, most of the time in LA, theater had been like, you would do scenes to show casting directors your work. There was very little just serious theater, and or serious, whatever you call it. It wasn't showcase.
Right.
Its intention was not to showcase yourself. It was to do theater. And a lot of people moved out from New York who were in the avant-garde theater scene there. And so we all started, sort of cross-pollinating.
Right.
And I asked Ed to be in a play called Are You Looking? By this guy, Murray Mednick, who I worked with a lot after that. And it was a difficult part to cast because it took the guy is going off junk and is physically very difficult role. And we had a couple of people who quit. And so somebody, finally, one of the producers said, "I know a guy I went to Cal Arts with, he could do it." Okay. And I went down and gave the script to him, knocked on his door. He knew I was coming. Yeah. And as I walked away, I thought, "Oh, God, I hope he does this." He would be incredible. Right. He had an energy. We're talking about the 70s.
Right.
He had an energy. And this was the first big thing he'd done in LA.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, that one was very successful. People were really impressed all the way around. It was a very intense play.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next play that I wanted to do was a play by Sam Shepard,
Right.
whom I'd met and was deeply influenced by. I did 12 or so plays of Sam's. And this play was called Cowboy Mouth, and he had written it with Patti Smith,
Mm-hmm.
and then performed it in New York. Now, so basically, it's Ed playing Sam,
Mm-hmm.
and right, and Sam was in town. I said, "You got to come down to see this guy to rehearsal,"
Mm-hmm.
and he was, whoa, and he went home and wrote "Fool for Love," in which the character's name is Eddie. I mean, so there's a cross pollination
Uh-huh.
of all. Suddenly, we had a theater scene here in LA, and Sam was an important part of it. And the guy I mentioned, Murray Mednick, we started a playwrights festival.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of those people, including Sam, from the East Coast, to teach people how to write plays.
Mm-hmm.
And Murray and I did something called the Coyote Cycle,
Mm-hmm.
which was 7 plays we made over 7 years each summer at Padua. And it was done outside, and it was based on Native American stories
Mm-hmm.
about Coyote.
Right.
So I played Coyote, and believe me, he's still impacting my life because he's a fool.
Uh-huh.
He's a total idiot who's driven around by his dick, and but he's an animal. He's a human, deeply human, and he's divine. He can't die.
Right.
He's a spirit.
Uh-huh.
And so to play that guy,
Yeah.
right? And again, it's being written for me.
Uh-huh.
So it's shaped in a way to my interests and my abilities. The play begins with me jumping out of a tree, falling from the sky is the premise. But I suddenly, instead of entering like a normal
Mm-hmm.
person, the audience is sitting around a circle in a clearing in the woods, and I fall from the sky
Wow.
and start to play.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And so we had 7 plays eventually, and we did them all outside, and we did them all night from
Wow.
dusk till dawn.
Uh-huh.
Right. So the audience is sitting there the whole time, following us around each space.
Uh-huh.
And so that whole scene that grew up out of Coyote, that became the Padua Hills Playwrights Conference and Festival,
Uh-huh.
and a lot of great playwrights who are working now, including John Robin Bates, who's had a lot of hit movies, plays, Substance of Fire, and other things, and has written extensively for television. So Robbie and David Huang, probably remember M. Butterfly. That was written by somebody from out of Padua. And so it has had a tremendous impact on theater everywhere, but particularly here in LA, became a center
Wow.
for progressive theater,
Uh-huh.
especially political.
Yeah.
And people don't think about LA that way.
Right.
And it's something else now, but there is still an incredibly vibrant theater scene here.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to, I could just keep acting all the time or
Right.
directing something.
Yeah.
The last thing I directed was a play of Sam's called The Unseen Hand, and it's a play. The premise of it is so silly, or it sounds silly. There's a space kid, and there are these 3 cowboys that get resurrected, and there's a kid from, that represents sort of the high school teenager.
Mm-hmm.
They're all thrown together, and then it rains ping pong balls.
Wow.
It's
It's crazy.
totally crazy and totally fun, and was a huge hit. Everybody wants to see that kind of energy.
Right.
So
you were a teacher, 12 years graduate film
Columbia.
division of Columbia University. Talk to me about your teaching, and do you enjoy teaching?
I absolutely love it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely love it. Partly because it regenerates me, and I'm passing on something. The course I taught was directing actors for film.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an approach that is slightly different than theater.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what I taught was straight from Jim Bridges. It was the way he related to actors,
Mm-hmm.
or to everybody on the set, actually, which was with respect. And he would always say, if somebody was having problems, he'd say, how can we help?
Mm-hmm.
Whether the guy is the greensman
Mm-hmm.
or the cinematographer, how can we help? So a lot of what I did was try to clarify that directing is not criticizing.
Mm-hmm.
It's the opposite.
Right.
In fact, you got to
It's
be able
guidance.
to say you got to say, oh, that's great. Now let's deepen that, or let's grow that. And how would you do that? And you personalize it.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you really talking to?
Right.
It's got to be somebody if you're talking to somebody you love, you got to have a picture of the person you love.
Mm-hmm.
And just have it in your head.
Mm-hmm.
It will impact what you're doing. And the other thing is that you have to give the character the life.
Right.
Let the character. You're doing it for the character.
Right.
You're there for what they need.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to get what they need. So, like a man I revered did a theater in New York and here, a guy named Joe Chaikin, and he developed, or would describe it this way: you have a condition,
Mm-hmm.
which is the way, who you are, where you are, all of that. Then something happens, and you have to have an intention
Mm-hmm.
to do something about the condition.
Mm-hmm.
So you do the intention. That's all you got to do, is try to achieve that intention, and that will be the form.
Mm-hmm.
That will be what your the line reading, all of that. Don't worry about that. Try to get what you want, and it will impact how you're talking.
Well,
It will
another quick
interact
question.
everything.
Yeah, another quick question for you is: do you prefer theater or do you prefer film?
No,
No.
no,
No or either.
no. There's no preference.
Uh-huh.
The last thing about that I think really is important is from Buster Keaton.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody asked Buster Keaton, well, how do you act, or how do you be funny?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, think slow,
Mm-hmm.
act fast.
Hmm.
So you figure out what you want to do,
Mm-hmm.
then you do it with energy. So no, I don't. It's all, to me, is the same
Mm-hmm.
in terms of film or theater. It's just some elements are different about it. For one thing, there's a camera right there, which you can't know.
Mm-hmm.
Can't know it's there.
The fourth wall.
It's like a cat being observed behaves differently. You don't want to. You can, if you can, forget it's there, but know that it's there. In other words, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to reach out. The other precept is have, don't show.
Mm-hmm.
Just have what you want,
Mm-hmm.
and that will be seen, especially in film.
Uh-huh.
That will be there in your eyes.
Exactly.
On stage, what's different is all these people are seeing it at the same moment.
Right.
So that's the camera is just one eye.
Mm-hmm.
All these people gotta see it, and especially if you're, in a big enough space, you got to make sure they all see it. How do you do that?
Yeah. How do
Right?
you do that?
How you do you do that?
Exactly.
The important thing is to not know how to do it as you go in to do it,
Mm-hmm.
because then you'll just show off.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not there to show off my abilities.
Right.
That's what a lot of acting, especially in movies, becomes showing off.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could name names. I'm not gonna. But
Right.
the best people, the best people are not trying to show you how great they are.
Right.
They're trying to show you what the character wants
Exactly.
deeply, right? And you can tell the difference.
Who that character is.
You can tell the difference. People who are showing off.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the same thing with directors and writers. A lot of them are there to prove how great they are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, oh, look at this shot I just set up. Or the script will have all these speeches in it that, thank you. I mean, in this case, I will name a name, Quentin Tarantino. It's all about how great he is. He gets great actors who,
Right.
you know, who can ground it, but not always either. Some of his movies, it's just, fellas,
He has
fellas,
a
calm
particular
down.
style. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't mind something being stylized at all. And especially in theater, I've done, Coyote.
Mm-hmm.
Coyote is some being that falls from the sky, and then his job, he announces, is to bring the waterfall to earth.
Mm.
What does that even mean?
Exactly.
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 And yet he says that's what he's got to do. And by the end of the seventh play, which has gone on all night,
right,
the waterfall comes out of the sky.
Oh, wow. He brings it.
So, yeah, at dawn. As the sun's coming up, the waterfall comes to earth. I've accomplished my mission. After I've gone through a lot of stuff, you know, and it's tasks that the Spider Lady sets out for you. What does that mean? Spider Lady's there, believe me.
Yeah.
And so in movies, it's similar in the sense of just get what you want, get what the character wants, and don't know you can. If you know it that this woman's going to love you, that fouls it all up.
Right.
Because then I'm not trying because I know it's going to happen.
Right.
Now all I got to do is show off.
In life, we don't know what's on page 3 when we start on page 1. We don't.
You can't.
Right.
But if you do, it messes up the relationship. Or whatever.
Exactly.
Whatever you're trying, it messes it up because then when you don't get what you want, you're pissed.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, wait a minute. I had this all, especially if you're a white man, just to get political for a minute, especially if you're a white man, you get what you want. Right. And when you don't, you're full of rage.
Right.
Which is, let's face it, where we're at.
Used to disappointment.
How dare they? How dare they not do what I want? Isn't that the setup?
That is the way it is.
That's the setup. So now it's not the setup anymore. They're pushing back on that. And it's freaking out the white men.
Yeah, because they're not used to change.
They're not used to exactly. They're not used to getting their way, what they want. Especially hard on young white men. Because they thought it was theirs.
Exactly.
They're thinking, oh, great. I'm going to make $1 million. Whatever. It isn't theirs. It never was, really.
We live in a multicultural world, and we need to get used to that.
Exactly. And it's not even binary. It's not just men, women. It's not one or the other.
Everything.
It's the whole panoply. And that is what we're getting to. Unfortunately, they're going to continue, and the women who enable them, they're going to stick to what they think is right. And if you don't do it, I'm going to make it illegal.
Yeah, there you go. Well, yeah. Okay. Now we're talking theater, we're talking films, but now let's switch over to Darrell, who is a author and writer, and tell me about your book.
My crazy ass book.
Yeah.
So I got real. Um, I got threw a grenade into my life.
Mm-hmm.
I was living in New York for some reason. There are there are reasons I could go into, but I had to sort of start again.
Okay.
So I came back to LA and got into some trouble, drugs and stuff, and I am sitting in my room in Topanga and going, how did I get here?
Right.
And so I went through every box I had,
Mm-hmm.
every little piece of paper, every note, every poem, every journal entry that I had, and put it all together.
And it's an
And that's what that
unusual
book
book
is.
too, because it's several different
It's
things.
That's right. It's a poem memoir with
Mm-hmm.
with journal entries and everything I could that I knew was me,
Mm-hmm.
including there's a whole ongoing thing about all the doomed blondes.
Okay.
Okay, so
Is
that
this one
goes
of your
from
poems?
no, it's actually film criticism, and
Okay.
it's nine, it's seven sections going through the whole book, and in each section there's another kind of essay about the doomed blonde. I start with Jean Harlow, and then I go to Carol Lombard, and then I go to Frances Farmer, and then I go to Marilyn, who's the primary doomed blonde. All
Mm-hmm.
these women had very similar relationships in their lives, but certainly they are the love goddess
Right.
of their period.
Mm-hmm.
And we still have them. And we, in some ways, we kill them, or we, the culture eats them up.
Right.
I mean,
Okay.
Marilyn is a perfect example, but
Mm-hmm.
Jean Harlow was too. Jean Harlow uh, was worshipped, and adored, but maligned and feared, and all those things. And she wasn't even. I don't think she was uh, past 35 years old.
Mm.
And you think about Carol Lombard too. I mean, it was a slightly different death,
Mm-hmm.
but they die young.
Yes.
And
Too
why is
soon.
that?
Yeah.
Too soon. And why is that? So that's what I was writing about. And
Mm-hmm.
why is that me? Because that is me. I mean, not that I'm the doomed blonde, but
Right.
that thought about it. There's also stuff about Cary Grant and Gary Cooper being kind of the yin and yang of each other.
Uh-huh.
I don't have to run that down, but when you look at it, you kind of go, "Whoa, that's really true." What does that mean?
It's really
The
fascinating.
the figure of the twins who are not twins,
Mm-hmm.
which Coyote, by the way, Coyote's nemesis is the trickster.
Mm-hmm.
And they're stalking each other for all seven of those plays. And that kind of thought pattern is
Mm-hmm.
me as much as anything.
Right. And
And
that went into your book.
yeah, so that's all in my book.
Uh-huh.
It's all, and trying to be as honest as I can about myself.
Right.
Why did I end up why did it come to that? I almost died. Why?
Yeah.
I can't just ignore that. So the book became that, and I didn't want to submit that to a
Mm-hmm.
publisher. Who would publish this?
Right.
And some of it gets very dark and sexual.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of erotic parts to me that come up.
Uh-huh.
Now I got to talk about honestly. I got to talk about my sexuality. I got to talk about it openly and without shame if I can.
Uh-huh.
Not that anybody can get past shame, but I got to say it anyway.
Right. Because it's
And
your
so that's
life.
what that
It's
book
you.
is.
It's who you are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if
Is the
and
book is the book available now? Like,
It's
where
in
would someone
Amazon.
get it? It's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon. It's called Person, Place, Thing, Way, Shape, Form. And if you just type in my name, it'll come up. I'd send you one, but I'm out of them.
Hmm. That's okay. We'll put a link under this video on YouTube
Okay.
and then the audio portion of the show, and that way
Great.
they can find that book from you.
Yeah. It really, if you go to Amazon and type in my name, it'll come up.
Hmm.
It'll be there. And I can't quite recommend it,
Hmm.
but if it sounds intriguing, then you should get it.
Yeah.
And it, again, it's a lot of fun.
And
but it's also,
and as you said, it's sort of autobiography. It's
totally.
sort of. It is.
Yeah.
It's definitely.
It's a memoir.
Mhm.
There are ongoing, there's I went to Russia at one point, 2007. So it's an ongoing, my journal in Russia, just as with the Doomed Blondes. So there's a sort of through line to it that sustain, I hope. Some people get it. Some people really dig it. Some people get freaked out by it, just like Mike's Murder. Some people go, what the hell is this? And I have to say, then it's not for you. If you can plow through all that, it is, I think, it is nourishing and
Right.
and first of all, a lot of fun, especially if you don't mind this pretty explicit sex, which is fun. Let's face it.
Yeah, I know, and it sounds like that it would be just an absolute great read, and you need to check that book out. Darrell, I have enjoyed this so much. Oh,
Me
my
too,
goodness. Man. Great meeting you and talking to you.
You too.
I would love to talk with you more. I wish we had more time, but I'm going to have to cut it short here. But thank you so much for being my guest on my show.
Well, thank you for asking me
You're welcome.
to be a guest on your show.
You are so welcome, Darrell. We will see you next time on The J. Michael Show.
Goodbye.